Bum 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 bum. Hey everybody. Uh this is Talkative Carl back again for a new comic book spoiler review. And this one we're going old school with the first appearance of the Avengers Earth's Mightiest Heroes or Superheroes. Written by Stan Lee, art by Jack Kirby. Before I continue, please do me a huge favor and like this video. Leave a comment below and definitely sub to my YouTube channel where I have plenty of content with regards to video game walkthroughs, comic book reviews, movie reviews, TV show reviews up on the channel, or just general topics that I want to discuss that's happening in the pop culture at large. So definitely check all those out. So yeah, cause I figured, cause in the upcoming weeks I will be getting into the Avengers films because since aside from one thing, one movie I still need to cover before I get into it, I really want in the coming weeks go through as some Avengers content in terms of at least the movies, and also I need to put on the list a couple of Avengers comics. So it's like I wanted to make sure that I got through at least the at least enough. Well, I pretty much covered a lot of the MCU stuff, but I really want to go through all the movies from the phases 1 through 3 uh uh before I got into the movies, and as well cover as much of the some of the heroes like comic adventures, which I went through Captain America. At least I got into at least few Captain America stuff on the channel, but I covered plenty of Iron Man. Actually, I didn't even cover. I don't think I'd cover a Hulk story at all on the channel, which is like a faux pas on my part. But I only covered like one Thor story, which is him going up against Gore the God Butcher for the first time, which is probably one of my favorite Thor stories that I've read. But I haven't read any Ant-Man comics, which I probably should. It's probably like a good slept-on hero. But irregardless, I figured that I need to, which now I'm thinking about it, I probably should do something similar for the Justice League, cover their first team up ever, but that's for another day. But I wanted to cover, excuse me, at least the first dozen issues, because this is like a mighty long, pardon the pun, mighty long omnibus. So I didn't want to cover all of it because so much to get through. So I figure I'll just cover like the first dozen issues, which should be like substantial enough. And so yeah, I mean, this came out in 1963 when the Avengers were hitting the stands. Prior to that, ironically, a lot of the members and a couple of other superheroes were like at least a year or two prior have already been created. So Stan was pretty much like, and Jack Kirby was pretty much chucking these things out quickly because around that time, only kids was buying up, comic books, whatever quarter or whatever they had on their, personage at that time. And you don't know how much of the stuff might have been, getting canceled. So a lot of that stuff they was really throwing some stuff out, seeing what sticks. As I'm going to go through all this stuff, there's going to be some kind of wacky things going on in these issues that seems kind of like out of this world, like even by comic book standards. I'll address it as it comes along. Uh, but I think, you know, that, I think Jack and Stan, at least around this time, really just didn't seem like they were in sync, because there's certain things that was going on where it's like, oh, like it can be written this way, so Jack has to, like, I don't know. I want to say they were being petty with each other. I mean, we all know, at least behind the scenes stories when it came to the dynamics between Jack and Stan. But because Jack seemed more of like the showman in a way, but it's just like, oh, this character will pull out this thing, and so Jack has to like figure out a way to make something happen, because it seems like from one panel to the next it seemed kind of jarring, because it didn't, like, the panels didn't seem to flow into one another. Like I said, it's just, one person be doing this thing, and all of a sudden Thor can, Iron Man could be doing this thing, and all of a sudden we knee jerk into another panel where Thor is doing another thing that seems kind of like, okay, kind of like warp from A to B pretty, or at least A to C, kind of like, it's kind of jarring. I try to like point out the panels as it comes through. So, like I said, it's it's the early stages, so you gotta give it some. And it was during the '60s, so you gotta give it some pass. But it's very wordy. Matter of fact, I don't think most of the narration boxes is really necessary, but I think they're just trying to like fit as much into these panels as possible to entice young readers of the time. But anyway, as you're going through, at least the first issue is very like, I won't say one-to-one to the first Avengers films, but you can see the inspiration they took from the first collab, because just like in the movies, the Avengers first team up was against Loki, and there is like a anchor point regarding the Hulk that brought them all together. So Loki is imprisoned on this Isle of Silence, but he still has some level of power to influence on Midgard. He wants his revenge on Thor, trying to entice him to come back to Midgard so he can draw him to him so he can exact his revenge. But he needs some. He needs a catalyst, something that really will catch his attention. So he take notice of the Incredible Hulk, who was only very recently created. So it was still like a Jekyll and Hyde thing going on with Thor at the time. And of course, during this period, I guess there was still a significant period where Hulk has some level of, still brain power to communicate. It wasn't probably until like getting towards like the 70s or 80s and some parts of the 90s where you're doing this whole Savage Hulk where he is kind of like a brute that speaks in short sentences. And then you get into like more of a smart Hulk thing. So yeah, there was a thing, because as I read through this, it's like, oh wow, I didn't realize there was like it was a thing back then that Hulk had some level of communication. Isn't as smart as Banner, but the fact that he can still communicate, like anybody else, is I guess it's kind of like a Mandela effect. We probably grew up with Savage Hulk for such a long while, it just like we tend to forget that his early years. But But yeah, so Loki uh manipulated Hulk's mind as he's jumping through past this railroad track, and he created an illusion to convince the Hulk there was dynamite on the railroad tracks. Hulk trying to he's still a good person. He sees this and tries to snuff out the explosion with his body, but it was all a trick. And because he landed with such force, he broke the railroad track, and the oncoming train, thinking like Hulk. Oh my God, because at this time people were thinking like the Hulk was this dangerous monster, and of course at this time nobody knows that Hulk is Bruce Banner. Similarly, at this time, people don't know that Iron Man is Tony Stark. They still had the whole bodyguard thing going on. They were still like living up to the whole secret identity phase of superheroes. Because also Thor has that secret identity as Dr. Donald Blake. As you saw in the first Thor film, they really kind of honor the spirit of that, which I respect. So Hulk still manages to save the train by using a boulder and propping up his body to allow the train to pass over him so it won't cause like a crash. But word still got out that Hulk nearly caused a derailment. So Rick Jones hear word of that, and so one, because the only superhero team that was around during this period was the Fantastic Four. It was the first superhero team ever created. I think, I'm not sure if the Justice League was created soon after the Fantastic Four, or if the Avengers came first. I'm pretty sure Justice League came after the Fantastic Four, but before the Avengers. I'm not sure of the timeline. Let me look this up really quick, because I'm curious. Here. Oh, 1960. Oh, so yeah, it's definitely before the Justice League. What about the Fantastic Four? I'm pretty sure it was before. (1961). Oh yeah, so yeah, no, Justice League was before everybody. So it was the Justice League. Yeah, now I recall. Yeah, it was some kind of documentary I watched years ago where after the success of the Justice League, Stan, needed like over in Timely Comics, wanted to have Marvel needed his own team, so that's where he came up with the idea of the Fantastic Four. But instead of it just being like a group of strangers coming together, it's like, oh, why would just have some kind of like a family? So that's where the Fantastic Four come into play. But then 2 years later, the Avengers became a thing. Anywho, so since the Fantastic Four was the big team of the time for at least a couple of years since their creation, Rick Jones, who is the friend of Banner and the Hulk, who sworn to help the Hulk any which way he can because he feels like he owe him not only for his life, but also because he regrets even because he feels responsible for the creation of the Hulk. Because if you know the story of the Hulk's backstory, Rick, went out in the middle of this testing ground unbeknownst to him. It was like a keep out situation because they was testing, gamma radiation and stuff like that. He was sitting there on his motorcycle, trying to take in like the scenery and play his harmonica. And then Bruce saw him, runs out to save his life, but got caught up in the gamma radiation, resulting in him being created into the Hulk. So Rick spent majority of his young life helping out the Hulk whenever he can. Here in this day and age, he's part of this teen brigade. It's the 60s. So they're a team of youngsters who are ham radio enthusiasts. Yeah. Like I said, it was the 60s. I'm pretty sure the radio was the big deal at the time, because like, oh my god, ham radios. It's kind of like people who were into like vinyl records and stuff like that. It's one of those kind of niche uh, interest that some people form cliques because it's not. I mean, you might poo-poo it and call it corny, but it really is no difference between people who have fantasy football leagues or poker nights, or people who are into like trading cards, and it's like we all grew up in like a particular time period where there are certain things that people get into. There's people out there who has like D&D nights, so it's like let's keep from judging this, even though I do think it's kind of corny as hell. It's like ham radios. Man, if I grew up at the time, I thought it'd probably be kind of nifty too. So it's like whatever. But anyway, these team brigades. This I find the team brigade is more stupid than the whole ham radio fascination, because like they're like a group of youngsters who want to. It's made for kids, so it's like Yeah. Sorry, 1 second. Sorry about that. Oh, these gnats flying all over the place. Trying to deal with that. Anyway, so since Rick Jones, the Team Brigade, it's so dumb. I mean, honestly, I get it. This, is comics. Young readers are watching this, so they want to feel like they can look at the Team Brigade and it's like, golly gee, I wish I can be part of like the superhero world and help out the heroes and save them the day. It's, a young kid's fantasy. So, they can project themselves onto the Team Brigade. I guess that's the purpose of them. But honestly, you could have just, I get the purpose, but it's like Rick Jones is good enough. Because Rick Jones is the only person on this supposed Team Brigade that's worth a damn, that has history and staying power because nobody knows any of these other people. It's like, honestly, if I will, after I'm done with this video, I want to look up and see what happened to the Team Brigade. I'm pretty sure they pop up every, probably once over the many years since, Rick had became A-Bomb, who had his own gamma powers and stuff like that. But honestly, the whole ham radio stuff, I'm pretty sure was kind of fell by the wayside. But it's really dumb. But in any case, Rick, hears chatter about what happened with the train. So he figures like, oh, Hulk and him had, their interactions with the Fantastic Four before. So he figures, oh, I'll go on my the ham radio and reach out through this like a unique radio frequency to reach out to the Fantastic Four to ask for help. But Loki, who's always, like has that mystical power, he can oversee certain things, where it's like, oh, I can't have the Fantastic Four interfering because I want Thor to get involved. So he kind of disrupts the flow of the transmission so it can reach to the radio of Dr. Donald Blake. Unfortunately, Iron Man, Ant-Man, and Wasp also pick up that frequency along the way. The Fantastic Four get it later, but they're already busy, with some other stuff, unfortunately. But they figure like, oh, other heroes, more than likely would hear about this particular situation, so they might come into play. But if they can't handle the situation, call us back and we'll jump in. But yeah, so Thor, Iron Man, and Ant-Man, Wasp show up at the Team Brigade's place. So now it's they answer the call and they explain the situation. Loki, then transmits like a illusion that only Thor spots of the Hulk passing by. So he immediately kind of exits the place without anybody knowing somehow, because this dude's a big demigod. How can you not notice? So he goes in and realizes, oh, it's a trick. This must be the work of my, diabolical brother Loki. And it's like, well, you kind of jumped to that conclusion. This is what I was talking about earlier, because like Stan and Jack, really don't have no kind of teamwork going on here, or really any cohesiveness with narrative matching the illustration. But it's just like, wow, you kind of jumped to, like I said, maybe because they didn't think, they was worried about cancellation going on, so they want to get as much out as they possibly can. So they kind of like got to get this kind of stuff out fast, knowing that slow pace crap. So I was like, oh, this must be the work of my evil brother Loki. So he heads off to Asgard, asking for Odin's help to go to the Isle of Silence to deal with Loki. While the other Avengers, track down where the Hulk is. And thanks to one of Ant-Man's aunts who's nearby and communicated with him, because they're trying to send out word to see where the Hulk could be. And he somehow is at a circus under the guise of some kind of green robot that's, helping out at this circus. Why? Maybe because like there was a thing where young kids, always want to run away and join the circus because, think like it's all fun and games and what have you. So I guess it's kind of like a play into that, I guess, of the time. But because the circus, I imagine it's not much to do back in the, 60s prior. in terms of wonder and entertainment. But uh, under this guise of some kind of like green robot, people don't pick up, oh, this is the Hulk, because he got this clown makeup on. So the Hulk notoriously always wants to be left alone. Why in the world would he even bother to join a circus? That is like, okay, that's kind of dumb if you know your fair share of Hulk history. But one, the ants sent out a message to Ant-Man as they located where the Hulk is, as he's lifting up a cage full of wild animals. Or like, not wild, but circus animals. So they end up tracking him down and get into a fight with the Hulk. Was they kind of carried it outside after Hulk jumped through the circus tent and destroy that readily. While on the Isle of Silence, as Thor going, bypassing all of these little traps that Loki set up, hoping to stop Thor once and for all. Even summoning this like troll creature that's ugly as sin. But even then, it wasn't stronger than Thor. And this is where the just weirdness of comics. Sometimes comics can be dumb. As a comic reader, I can freely admit that. Like, yeah, comics can be kind of stupid sometimes. But even by comic standards, this is really stupid. Where it's like Thor utilizing his enchanted hammer, he gathered the magnetism of the surface to kind of like a tractor beam, pulled Loki towards the hammer so he can bring him back to Midgard to prove the Hulk's innocence. And it's like, and you never see Thor's hammer do this afterwards. Like I said, they're doing a lot of things with these characters where, oh, I'll just pull out this thing and it will just quickly solve this problem. It's worse than any Deus Ex Machina you ever seen in modern times. So while on his way back to Midgard, the Hulk is tangling with the other soon-to-be Avengers. As a matter of fact, it was Thor who coined the word Avengers. Actually, most people might not know this. As he's going up against Loki, he says basically from what he's done on Midgard, they will be avenged. I'm paraphrasing, but that's pretty much how it is went. So now Iron Man's going up against Hulk, sending like Hulk sending like a piece of metal, a hunk of metal towards Iron Man. He catches it and he just balls it up and forms it into some kind of like one of those kind of like arm grabber things you see in those carnivals or like arcades. And it's, like I said, just doing things. It's kind of like what you would have saw in like those 80s He-Man cartoons. There's like this one thing where He-Man kind of magic this chain back together again as good as new. And it's like what the hell? It's basically the same thing. There's just no rhyme or reason. Even by comic book standards, like it gets more weird than you might think in modern comics. Like between like 40s up to the 80s, in terms of like comics and cartoons, and it comes to like superhero stuff, they just like do whatever just to solve a problem lickety split without because it's make it easier. We don't want to have to put too much thought into this kind of stuff. So they temporarily subdue the Hulk, where Thor brings in Loki to prove Hulk's innocence. Loki turns himself into some kind of radioactive statue, and then Hank and Janet get the ants to release some kind of trap door or something. I don't know. They fight in some kind of warehouse that conveniently connects to some lead line container where they trap in Loki. And that's where they, all agree, like, wow, we work very well together. We should, be a team, and they all agree. And they bring in, like, the Hulk figures, like, it's better than being hunted, so I'll join too. So that's where they officially form the Avengers. They will be the founding members. Hank and Janet, Iron Man, Hulk, and Thor. So on the next Avengers, since this Space Phantom, this ugly looking thing that, is one of those one-off villains that doesn't have any kind of staying power at all. Kind of funny if they ever bring this kind of character back. But he's some kind of alien creature that can swap places with, take up the image of whomever he impersonates, while the person cannot occupy the same space as each other. So he impersonates this guy in a suit who goes into some kind of suspended animation somewhere while Space Phantom impersonates him. He's been watching from afar and he wants to kind of take over, but he realized, oh, the Avengers might be a problem. So let me take him out first. Which he comes up with the idea of kind of causing them to fight amongst themselves. Because when it comes to these superheroes, especially Marvel Comics, they always, like, somehow, some way end up bickering amongst each other. It wasn't until, like, a little bit of the modern age where that becomes, like, a little less and less, because there was, like, a thing, like they're not, it takes them a while to actually become friends, or even family in some cases, where they find some way to argue amongst each other. So the Avengers have their first meeting, and Thor, is kind of like, I won't say making fun, but it's pointing out to the Hulk where it's like, dude, you need to put on some kind of clothes. You can't just come into a meeting just wearing, like, purple shorts. And the Hulk, of course, with the attitude, it's like, piss off, leave me alone. So, of course, like, Hulk and Thor always, for a while they tend to have static, but they always end up the best of friends. But they know is because the base operations happen to be in Tony Stark's townhouse. This is before the whole Avengers mansion becomes a thing, or even Jarvis becomes a thing. So they notice there's like somebody breaking into the HQ. Hulk goes in first, thinking like, "Oh, I'll handle this myself. No puny human can take on Hulk." That's when Hulk gets replaced, and the Space Phantom. I keep wanting to call him the Phantom Stranger. The Space Phantom then starts to cause like infighting, getting them to think like the Hulk is just like an asshole. So they cause like a fight between him and between Thor and himself. But then he kind of like decides to leave. And of course, the person who we impersonated earlier comes back, and coincidentally, he's just around the corner from the townhouse. As he comes back, like, guys, you wouldn't believe I was in this weird place, and the Space Phantom was like, can't have him, telling where he was, because they might believe him, and it's kind of like, why would they believe him? But he's an alien, so he doesn't understand the concept of, wacky people that might say whatever, and people knee-jerk reactions to not believe. So he ends up causing havoc as the Hulk to prevent like that communication dragging on. But Rick Jones happened to be by and thinking that's the Hulk. Like, Hulk, what you doing, buddy? Let's get out of here before people call the cops. So Space Phantom playing along because like, okay, let's play along for a while. So I don't want rouse too much suspicion. So he climbs up on fake Hulk's back and he leaps to secluded meadow, uh, and then reveals himself as like the Space Phantom and leaps away. And it's like I gotta let the Avengers know, because that was a stupid thing to do, to reveal yourself if you really want to cause like further confusion. But he figures like, oh, he doesn't know this lone human knows or can get in touch with the Avengers. So as the Avengers try to track down the Hulk, and you figure it's like, oh, let me switch out again, and switch places with them. He first switched places with like a wasp, a literal wasp, while real Hulk comes back, and then of course Iron Man, thinking like Hulk is like going as like rampages, is one of those stupid little moves that illustrates like, oh, I'll just turn my arm into some kind of club, and it's like, or hammer, I should say, and it's because they Space Phantom as the Hulk try to fight Iron Man, but even though he looks like a Hulk and has some level of strength, he isn't the same degree as a Hulk. It's like I said, it's like you're taking an impersonation. I guess it's kind of like Mystique, in a way, kind of, but not, because it doesn't fully explain. Just because you take the impersonation of somebody, you shouldn't have the same power set. But even if it's true, which he's trying to illustrate, he doesn't have the same degree of strength as the Hulk. So Iron Man is able to cause harm to him, which causes confusion with Iron Man. It's like, that that degree of strength shouldn't be able to hurt the Hulk normally. So it's got to, it arouses suspicions. So that's where he eventually do like a quick transfer. So now Hulk is confused as to why Iron Man is attacking him, and he just cobbles together this little hammer out of his little suit. Mind you, this is his second, I think Mark II or Mark III armor. I'm pretty sure it's Mark II, where it's just all gold, and it isn't as good, but better than the first one he cobbled together while he was trapped in that cave, all those years ago. And of course, he still had like a whole chest piece thing that he has to hook up to the wall like a plug-in to charge up, because he had a heart condition and stuff. So, really isn't good at all. Because he flies very lumberly, not very smooth like his other armor sets would typically do. So Hulk and Iron Man ends up fighting. While Janet gets captured by the Space Phantom, which alerts Giant Man. So while he's trying to separate both Iron Man and Hulk to keep them from fighting, his senses pick up the fact that Jan is in trouble, because that's his wife and everything like that. Oh, by the way, I want to bring up the fact that it was the 60s, so mind you, since Janet was the only female on the team, Stan really did not give this lady, who is a founding member of the Avengers, the kind of dignity that probably should have been given. But she's just always swooning over Thor. She's worried about shopping and makeup and stuff like that. And of course, having Hank says some things is like, you know, uh, 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 like, dames, am I right? Kind of attitude. It's like, oh, Janet, stop worry about, shopping for once. It, it's a little bit chauvinistic. I really don't like you having to use that word, but it kind of fits in this particular context. So yeah, it's doesn't look good, but there's a level of leeway given the fact that many years ago, and this was like kind of rhetoric you might see in certain shows or comics of the time or movies of the time. So uh, just bear that in mind. Anyway, uh, so Space Fan will take the image of Giant Man, uh, and then eventually take the image of Iron Man, but Hulk spots the whole transform. So the jig is up. It's like, we know you're some kind of creature that's taking like the image of us. Thor ends up showing up thanks to Giant Man letting Janet know, like, hey, you gotta find Thor. We need some help. And of course, once again, they don't know Donald Blake is Thor, so he let them know a long while. It's like, hey, if you ever need my assistance, contact Dr. Donald Blake. He knows how to reach me. So she goes to Donald Blake, let him know, like, hey, we need your help. We need Thor's help. Find Thor. And so Thor, using his, because it was the way to transform, he taps his cane, which is Mjolnir in disguise, to transform himself from Blake to Thor. So he shows up, and Janet, who starts going after the fake Iron Man, and once again, it's kind of dumb, where just he took the image of somebody, somehow his body becomes the actual armor with the wires and metal workings of an armor. She's pretty much taking it apart, and it should be all fake. So he starts, messing up the components of Space Phantom's fake armor. So it kind of messes it up. So Space Phantom was thinking like, oh, I'll just take the image of Thor and I'll become the most powerful amongst you. But since his power doesn't work on somebody like an Asgardian, it kind of gives like a negative feedback. So it pushes him into suspended animation and brings back Iron Man. And since like, that quickly solves that problem, because he needs to be able to have somebody switch places with him. But since he's not here, he's pretty much trapped. And that's it with the Space Phantom. But Hulk figures like, oh, I know what you guys, were talking down about me and treat me like, I'm not part of the team or whatever like that. So I'm just going to take off. Screw you guys. I'm going home. So there's always like a thing in early Avengers stories where members go in and out, quite a bit because of, fighting amongst themselves. But Hulk was, definitely like the one to constantly do it. Because people never really trust the Hulk because all those kind of warped stories, made up about him being like a savage and causing all this destruction when he really was helping, or it's just misunderstandings. So that bad reputation kind of tends to follow him. It's kind of like the situation with Spider-Man, thanks to J. Jonah Jameson, where it's like, oh, he's a menace and blah, 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 blah. So, most of New York really don't end up trusting Spider-Man for quite a bit of his history. So that's the end of that slide. But the team doesn't want Hulk just roaming around unchecked. So they spent most of the next issue trying to track him down. Now, mind you, there's already other popular characters with like ongoing stories because this is the Avengers' first rodeo. So they didn't know how Jackie and Stan didn't know how well this was going to turn out to be down the line, at least at that time. So kind of like with Spider-Man, where he teams up with some other newbie heroes just to legitimize them a bit. Similar to Fantastic Four and like X-Men. Matter of fact, they constantly do that with those particular groups of three. Because they did that with Black Panther, where he shows up with in like a Fantastic Four kind of story, or the Inhumans with the Fantastic Four, or certain people with with the X-Men. So using this image inducer, Iron Man projects himself to the Fantastic Four, to Spider-Man, and to the X-Men. And this is like early stages of their, careers themselves. And of course, this is like they barely, know other superheroes. So, and it was like a thing where it's like, they're written in a way they don't seem like they don't like each other or trust each other. It was kind of like bizarre anyway. They should hurt of each other rather than just like come out of the freaking blue. But Iron Man shows up to the Fantastic Four like, hey, we're looking for the Hulk. If you hear word, if you hear any kind of rumblings of where he could be, please let us know. And I was like, sure thing, buddy, whatever. But then he shows up to Spider-Man like, hey, you ever worried about the Hulk? And Spider-Man, which by the way is the most poorly drawn Spider-Man I've ever seen in my life. Jack Kirby never was responsible for the creation, or at least the illustration of Spider-Man's suit. So of course it looks kind of dopey looking. But Spider-Man is very rude to Iron Man's, and it's like, hey dude, like I got my own problems. Can you like, leave me alone? I was like, fine, you little punk, never mind, shit. And it's like Spider-Man never like just talk with people like that, especially somebody he knows that's been around for a minute, a hero that's been around for a minute, whatever. And then he shows up to the X-Men, and Professor X was like unnecessarily rude because in a different kind of story, the X-Men Angel helped out with Iron Man, or at least one of the other Avengers. Pretty sure it was Iron Man, either Iron Man or Giant Man, one of the two. Helped out with like a separate situation in one of their comics, and was told like, hey, you can always come to me and the X-Men if you ever need any help. So here comes Iron Man, showing him to the X-Men. And mind you, this is like early X-Men, where it's like a Beast where he was still human looking. So it's like in the yellow and blue kind of outfits that they had, similar uniforms. It was like he shows up like, hey, have you guys heard or hear any kind of rumblings of the Hulk anywhere around? Because we're trying to look for him. Can you give us any word? And Professor X is like, yeah, no problem, we'll do. But please don't ever show up randomly, like this. Unannounced, like. It's like the way it's like set up. It's like super rude, knowing how Xavier is. He will never like talk to anybody like that. Yeah, given the fact that he is rude, the way he just came in unannounced, as in like an ethereal form, but I don't know. I'm pretty sure we all would have been a little miffed. The fact that it was like a unannounced visit, just popping up the way he has. But it is like seriously, Uh, it's like here it is. We shall notify you as you request if we hear anything about the Hulk. And now my training class is still in session, so I'll thank you to leave by the same means as you arrive. Uh, like who dares interrupt my our training period? I was like come on, buddy. Whatever. What is it? Yeah, here's this. Tales of Suspense. Yeah, it was an Iron Man story where Angel was helping out with Iron Man with a situation in one of his stories. Like I mentioned before, it's like all these other heroes were only fairly recently created at the beginning of the 1960s, like or at least late 50s and getting into the 60s. So they're fairly new and already popular. The Avengers was just being a thing. So just to legitimize them, you see them just showing up in these other stuff, or at least little blurbs just to say like, hey, check out more of the Avengers stuff. But they eventually find the Hulk and they take him on, but this is kind of like a showing how there's quite a few occasions where we see like the Hulk isn't just like a blumbering idiot with just brutish strength. He can actually do some serious damage. If you see like a character go all out in the most efficient of ways, it shows how deadly they can actually be if they actually give it, like a legit like college try, or don't pull their punches. Like as Doc Ock took over the body of Peter Parker and actually used his skills, his full capability, shows that he can be a legit, threat if he take it seriously enough. Or at least Peter Parker takes his powers seriously enough, he can be like a serious threat. Or even see like other alternate alternate universe versions of themselves. There's quite a handful of them that actually are the more serious and deadly amongst his variants. That shows like one that was trained by Wolverine, and you see him like actually being like a deadly threat, like Wolverine. So it's kind of like, okay, this, you can see something similar here with Hulk. The only other time I could see him go all out that's not like a variant in an alternate reality is during like the World Hulk, but it was like after when he left Sakaar to come back and exact his revenge on the Illuminati who sent him out into space in the first place, where he takes on like Doctor Strange, Black Bolt, Professor Xavier, Iron Man, etc., and he actually can take them on seriously. So here you get to see another example where he pretty much like handed Thor, Iron Man, and Giant Man their ass while making his escape. And that's where he ends up later on running into Namor the Submariner, who is using gizmos because he's not like leading Atlantis. I think he was like at this point kind of exiled or disgraced or something like that. So he wanted to exact his revenge on the surface world, is usually his thing in his early stories. And this is one of the things that like, I'm not a full Namor Submariner like history buff like that, but what just of knowledge I do know of him, he will definitely not utilize like machinery and scientific gizmos like you see him utilizing in this story in order to take on the Avengers. He figures like, I can use this Hulk because his strength can easily take on the likes of these Avengers. So after a brief fight, because Namor is one of the a handful of people who actually can actually go toe to toe with somebody like the Hulk. Uh, like like there's uh, Wolverine and Ben Grimm, and Namor is like, off the top of my head, the top three individuals can actually is known to take on the Hulk, like almost to a stalemate most of the time, which you rarely see with, or even like Ghost Rider, but it's not as often. They can actually take on the Hulk in like a decent fight. In terms of the heroes, but then there's also like the Juggernaut. But there's also Thanos, but Thanos actually is known to take on and beat Hulk, more often than not. And this is like without the whole Infinity Gauntlet situation. So Namor convinces Hulk to like, hey, team up with me. We can take on our shared enemies. But deep in thought, they both plan on betraying the other because Hulk won't be left alone. He doesn't like taking orders, and Namor thinking like he can easily like take on this brute and ditch him, and whatever. Just they want to use each other. So utilizing these gizmos to distract and the Avengers, like I said, Namor would not use a gun or a missile launcher. It's like very weird. Unless it's like Atlantean tech or some kind of thing. That's the only other thing you can actually like let like your brain can say like, oh yeah, that tracks with Namor. He actually the ruler of the Atlantis, who actually have their own particular brand of tech that they use, and it could have just gone with that, and that would be a little bit more acceptable. But that, and he has some kind of submersible too. It's like he's part Atlantean, he can survive. I guess it's the whole purpose of having like, the Hulk, because he can't breathe on the water or hold his breath for too long. But they end up taking on the Avengers, and the pea shooter that Namor has is some kind of gas propelled thingamabob that paralyzes the machinery inside Iron Man's armor. Which, by the way, speaking of the armor, he swapped out the whole solid gold thing and went with the Mark III, which is better, but this is like long before his standard Mark IV armor that we pretty much are used to of him utilizing. But he, has these little gizmos he just pulls out of his ass. Like, I can utilize this to maneuver the or repel the missile so it won't do us harm. But he ends up getting paralyzed, which becomes like a danger to him because it's like the apparatus is supposed to keep his heart pumping without it, working like it needs to. Is paralyzed. Is the shrapnel? He's worried about the shrapnel reaching his heart, but they actually get that, his armor moving again really quickly. So while they're trying to take on Namor and the Hulk, the Hulk eventually starts, for no rhyme or reason, starts reverting back to Bruce Banner. So he kind of slinks away while Namor is left to handle the situation on his own. So, he eventually getting overpowered, despite his skills as a fighter and his incredible strength in his own right. But he still needs to be, submerged in water to keep that going, or at least, constantly wet. But he eventually starts drying out, but then he has to go to the water to regroup essentially, which he kind of like is pissed at himself because he doesn't like running away or getting the. He feels like he's dishonoring himself by having to slink away like a coward. But he eventually come across this, group of Eskimos who are worshiping this ice pillar that seemingly has some kind of being inside. Which, because he's kind of like pissed with himself, he kind of like frightening them and then tossing this, figure into the water. And while the Avengers are searching for Namor and the Hulk, they come across this ice figure. They bring it up on board their ship, and while it's while it's thawing, it is the first appearance of Captain America since the 40s in the Timely Comic stuff. So this is the most iconic image of Captain America, at least one of his iconic image of Captain America. Probably second to the image of him hitting Hitler across the jaw. And everybody's just astonished, like, oh my God, we heard tales of Captain America. We always thought he died during WW2, but here he is. And of course, he wakes up puzzled about, like still the last images of Bucky dying via like this flying ship that they tried to stop from causing like a massive explosion, at a city. You know the tale. But Cap ends up falling into the waters with his last image of the ship exploding from in the air safely, but thinking Bucky got caught up in that. Of course, it'll be like a couple of decades before they bring Bucky back as the Winter Soldier. But for all intents and purposes, during a good period of time, Bucky has been dead in the comics. So this is one of Cap's biggest regrets, that he couldn't save Bucky. So he fell in the water with that last image, and he was frozen in time throughout this point. Now, this is during the 60s, so it's only 20 years removed from the 40s. So some people are still remembering are still alive during the, at least elderly at this point, but still remember the adventures of Captain America fighting Nazis in WW2. And of course, as time goes on and comics evolve, that gap in time keeps shifting. So most people won't be alive to say like, oh yeah, I remember Cap during this period when I was like a youngster. Nowadays, it's like, my grandfather once told me stories of such and such with Captain America. So while Cap is trying to get acclimated into this modern day, or modern day in terms of 60s, everybody's waiting for the Avengers to arrive on Ellis Island from their little adventure trying to track down the Hulk and blah, blah, blah. All of a sudden, they're turned to stone, which is puzzling to everybody. Cap is coming out of the ship, and he doesn't know what's going on. He thinking like, oh, they made statues of these guys, but it's kind of weird positions they have them in. But he ain't thinking much of it. People sitting there like, oh my God, it's Captain America. He really is alive. Because like, I guess they got word out to the people that they found a living legend back again. So as he's put up into this hotel, he is woken up by Rick Jones, who he easily mistaken as Bucky, because he kind of looks like him in a way. At least during this period of time, they kind of make him look. They kind of drew him very similar to the way like Bucky might have looked at that time. But thanks to the Team Brigade, or at least like the mechanisms he uses with the Team Brigade, they Bucky Rick brings up that the Avengers has gone missing, and the last we saw was when they arrived on the shores, and they look onto the images that was taken with the constant photos, and Cap notices like, this doesn't look any kind of camera that I ever seen, and Rick is like, no, that's not a camera at all. This dude, must have been involved using this kind of weird gun to probably turn those guys to Axel Stone. So utilizing the Team Brigade to, and it's kind of weird because even for the 60 standards, it's kind of stupid, where they're like, oh, we got an image of this guy with his hat and sunglasses who looks exactly like this. Let's go around town and see, we can find a guy. And they, mistake a couple of people, but it's just like they somehow, some way end up tracking down the exact guy who didn't bother to skip town, whatever. And Cap ends up tussling with this guy who has a group of cronies or thugs with him. And it turns out this dude is an alien in disguise. Comics can be weird. And in case you didn't notice, because if you watch my review of one of the X-Men stories, Dark Phoenix, where the evil, at least the Dark Phoenix, not the regular Phoenix, but the Dark Phoenix really corrupting Jean Grey, ends up going to space for a brief stint, ends up blowing up a planet. This is this, this guy's from that exact same race as that planet that the Phoenix will eventually destroy, because he will eventually go back to his home world by the end of this issue. And so not sure he will end up making it there, but for all intents and purposes, his race is going to be completely annihilated in just a handful of years. But in any case, he ends up telling a story how he got trapped on his home on Earth for many, many years ago. And the fact that he tried to get some assistance from the human race, but because it's during I guess around the time would have been ancient Greece, and they mistook him for Medusa. I guess that's where the legend of Medusa would have gotten started, because he had this ray gun that turned people into stone. So they just, at that time, just convinced themselves this must be some kind of creature, which they dubbed Medusa. So, because he couldn't get no help from any of the inhabitants over the years, he remained trapped, and his ship that crash landed here is he couldn't find the necessary instruments to fix it. So he resigned himself here, and for some I forgot the exact reason why he just decided to just turn the Avengers into stone. Let's answer this in this panel, because this is kind of dumb. Yeah. It was some mariner who convinced him to do his bidding, because since his ship is in the waters, and I guess Submariner is kind of holding it hostage, so he had to do Namor's bidding. So Cap convinces him to revert the a transformation to help the Avengers, so they can all go back to help this alien and stop Namor. Now, while reading through this, clearly as you're going through the this particular issue, Namor and Cap don't know each other, which they should, because Namor helped Cap during WW2 to fight the Nazis. is, always been like a thing. But here, I guess in the early years, because they kind of retcon that, I guess later after this situation. But it's just kind of weird that they don't know each other at this point, because you'll think that it's like, hey, we used to be friends. Let's not act like this, kind of thing. But Namor, who reconvened with some Atlantean soldiers, take on the Avengers while the alien creature fixes his ship and cast off. So after the brief fight, Namor and the others kind of slinked away because they couldn't take on the Avengers. They're despite Namor having like a small army with him, it wasn't enough. Despite the lack of a Hulk. So, in his other short issue, where Cap is training the Team Brigade, more specifically Rick, who's kind of taken on as like a protege because after the whole situation with the Hulk, Rick, looks at Cap as like a mentor in a sense, and teaching Bucky and the others how to fight and maneuver, as well as they possibly can, eating the right diet, getting enough sleep, all this other stuff. But across the country, there's like a weird sound that is like irradiating and it causes kind of destruction here and there. So the Avengers come together to figure out where this sound is originating from, which they track to the southwest, which they assume has something to do with the Hulk because that is pretty much his stomping grounds typically. Ironically, General Ross, along with Betty and some military people, and with Bruce Banner, who's back, and unbeknownst to Ross or Betty, they don't know he's the Hulk. But he convinces them, oh, he was sick for a while, but I'm back. So they find this mysterious rock that's, protruding from the Earth's crust, and trying to figure out where this comes from, and this is the source of the. And they figure out this. It has to be like the source where this mysterious sound is coming from, and we come to learn there's like these lava men is utilizing this machine that's causing this high pitched shriek that's causing like destruction randomly, because it's trying to push this, they call it a living rock, up to the surface. And it turns out this mysterious rock causes, like, when struck, causes kind of like an explosion, or at least some kind of explosive feedback. Trying to not endanger themselves, they're trying to push it up and figure like, oh, let the surface people deal with it, cause unbeknownst to them, cause like an explosion that might disrupt the surface world, and we can pretty much pick up the pieces once all that happens. Despite one of them being protest that idea because they, at least one of them, gotten familiar with the surface people, and they're peaceful people that but the witch doctor is like, shut up, and pretty much like casts himself to the side. Cast the guy to the side so he can, continue on with the leader to continue on with the procedure. Okay, going on to the next slide. So they end up, tracking down the source and go underneath the Earth's crust to track down and find this tunnel system where they find these lava men. Of course, Iron Man goes in first, considering that uh, he has the knowledge and is kind of irradiating a bit, so his suit can pretty much take in or can take it. And he ends up finding these lava men that kind of dogpile on him, and they kind of superheating his suit. But thanks to Thor showing up, he kind of tells the rest to like go to the surface with Giant Man to expect how to deal with this thing. I will deal with these lava men, because probably this isn't like the first time Thor deals with these like underdwellers before. And of course, the lava men are kind of like befuddled, like Thor not realizing his godhood. He can just walk through these lava without any harm to him. It's just that like deadpan look is like, this is really nothing. He literally walks through all this kind of crap, and he's like, I want to speak with like the person in charge here. We gotta leave the surface world alone. All the while, Ant-Man and Wasp deduce that the this rock is have some explosive components to them. There is one small area that doesn't have the type of radiation it gives off, so it can strike. If they get Thor to strike this particular spot, it can destroy the entire substance, so it won't cause damage. One second. But Bruce, for some weird reason, they don't really explain it. Maybe it has something to do with the shrieking sound, but it didn't really illustrate that. But he ends up changing into the Hulk. And mind you, normally when Bruce changes into the Hulk, something gotta anger him, or he gotta be in some kind of danger. But he just changes. So they're causing like a fight. Oh my God, the Hulk is here. We gotta deal with that. But we also gotta deal with these lava man and this living rock that's explosive. But since fighting with the witch doctor causes Thor to shift into Donald Blake temporarily, and since they can't reach Thor quickly, they trick Hulk into striking the spot that's needed, causing the rock to completely obliterate into pieces. But Hulk, in the explosion, slinks away, and he ends up changing back to Bruce Banner once again, no rhyme or reason. And Betty ends up finding him and making sure he's okay. Well, Thor shows back up after changing back. Then we get into a story where we are introduced to Baron Zemo, who's in like a South American jungle, being who's ruling over these indigenous tribes, and is getting word to one of his lackeys that in like a newspaper where Captain America is found alive. So still remembering, battling him during the 40s, and him being the cause of why. Little did I didn't even know this. I know this is the look of Baron Zemo, but I didn't know that for a period of time, the sock head of his is stuck to his face, and he can't take it off because of this sticky substance he created a long time ago called Adhesive X. And because his fight with Captain America caused an accident where this stuff got onto his mask, so now it's kind of stuck to his mask, and he can never take it off, and therefore he always has like a bitter grudge with Cap. So now he plans on gathering the Masters of Evil to take on Cap and the Avengers. And so he recruits the Black Knight, not the good one. I think maybe this might have been his predecessor, who I'm assuming might have been his father, who wields a lance, while the one that we know wields a sword. So the Black Knight, who I guess would have been Giant Man's nemesis, teams up with Radioactive Man, who is normally Thor's nemesis, and also the Melter, who is normally Iron Man's nemesis. And so they're utilizing the adhesive X to wreak havoc on the city, causing people to get stuck to surfaces with no way of figuring out how to unstick themselves. So the Team Brigade contacts the Avengers, who show up to try to deal with their respective foes, but they get, they fight to a stalemate pretty much. They end up getting away while Cap and Giant Man get stuck to the ground. So while regrouping, they kind of figure out, okay, we got to figure out how to unstick them before it becomes permanent. And one of them, I think it was Janet, who comes up with the idea of contacting or trying to get a hold of the villain Paste Pot Pete, or the Trapster, who is normally Spider-Man's bad guy. But since he's in prison, they contact the police to get a hold of him. And in lieu of a reduced sentence, since he has complete knowledge of all things like sticky, gluey, all that other stuff, they've asked him, like, hey, do you know a way to unstick people with this particular substance? So he tells them, okay, I have a particular warehouse that has this drum full of chemicals that can unstick anything. And that also brings the attention to Baron Zemo, who figures like, oh, I can utilize this so I can figure out a way to unstick my mask. So he gathers the Master of Evil to further cause havoc to the city. And since their combined efforts can really cause trouble with the Avengers, they figure they'll, win no problem. So they utilize this, substance after Iron Man picks it up. They unstick Cap and Giant Man and figure they can mass produce this so they can unstick the city. And they also come up with the idea, okay, when we run through these guys again, since they are familiar on how to take us on, we just trade dancing partners, which is like a pretty good idea. So you see like Iron Man picking up the substance after getting away from the Trapster. So Giant Man takes on Radioactive Man. Thor takes on Black Knight. Iron Man helps with Giant Man, and they trap Radioactive Man in this lead line wrapping, while Thor easily bests Black Knight. Not even a challenge. And they also deal with the Melter. By tricking him to blasting his melting ray up against fire hydrant that shoot out water, just ruins his machinery. While Zemo gets these substance that might unstick his mask, Cap takes him on and it's like, oh wow, you really are alive. And so they old grudges bring are coming up, and they end up taking each other on in a fight. Uh, but Zemo manages to slip away with the canister. Well, he thinks it's a canister full of that unsticky substance, but the Team Brigade ends up swapping the canisters. So what Zemo thinks is the unsticky substance is tear gas, which is kind of like a funny way to end like that villain. One second. So in this next adventure, we get the not the introduction, but we see Enchantress and Executioner pop up into this particular adventure. Iron Man in like a separate adventure. He didn't show up when the Avengers called him during some kind of emergency, so he's getting suspended, and of course he can't tell them why he had to. He didn't answer the call because he doesn't want to let them know who he really is. So he's suspended for a bit of time, while Odin back on Asgard is exiling Enchantress and Executioner for their misdeeds, for attacking Thor and everything like that. So, stripped of their weapons and a bit of their power, they're exiled to Earth. Like, really, Odin, you really think these two will not wreak any type of havoc on Midgard amongst mortals who they're still plenty of stronger compared to them? It's weird. They're not like, you didn't at the very least do what you did with Thor and made him mortal. You could have at least done that, so they have no basis of causing any type of havoc. But then, I don't understand. This is so dumb. I don't even know how I even got this, but Rick Jones finds a costume of Bucky's. And it's like, how do you get a costume of Bucky's and where Cap find it? Maybe he had some kind of storage unit that was recovered or something, or some museum that had it maybe. But why in the world will Rick, and I mean, maybe because he was hanging out with him too much, he thought himself as like his new sidekick or whatever. But it's like, it was so dumb. Like, it's so disrespectful that he thought in any kind of way that was okay. Where he show up to Cap dressed as Bucky, like, hey, look, Cap, I kind of do look like Bucky, don't I? And this is kind of unbecoming, or at least we never see like Cap get this angry with somebody like this. That's not like a villain. It's very rare, but he kind of like snaps at Rick. It's like, take that off. What the freak is wrong with you? Don't you ever, wear something like this? And he tells him to get the heck out. And like, it was very much disrespectful. And mind you, he is technically a kid, so he doesn't know any freaking better. But I don't know. He should have some level of knowledge. Like, yeah, this kind of like gauche to do with somebody who pretty much, in a sense, come out of a coma in like a modern times, and the last thing he knows of, he lost his friend. Is still in his mind fresh, and you do something like this. It's so dumb. Like, why would the heck would you do that? So Executioner and the Enchantress, now on Midgard, figures that they need some type of uh, uh, they come across like a newspaper about Zemo's last exploits, and it's like, oh, we need to find this guy, and teaming up with him in order to get their revenge on Thor, who Enchantress is infatuated with, but Executioner is infatuated with her, and want to get rid of Thor so he can be the one that uh, that she will look at as a suitor. It's like the Executioner has always been like the ultimate friend zone character in comics. Let's be real. Uh, so uh, they team up with Zemo, who he convinces, Executioner to dress up in a disguise to. It's like, I don't know why you need a disguise because Cap doesn't know you, but whatever. Convinces Cap, like, oh, I used to be an ex-Nazi. I know where Zemo is. I can lead you to him. So he ends up going to the jungle where Zemo would be. Now, mind you, the Avengers figure like, oh, there's nothing that is popping off that needs the aid of the Avengers. So let's go back to our, separate stories and what have you. So Janet and Hank go off to Europe to deal with some kind of, scientific research about these different insects over there. Thor goes off to try to give his own exploits, and Iron Man's own suspension. So while Thor gets tricked by the Enchantress, and she convinces him in his adult mind that the Avengers are really his enemies, that he needs to destroy. While Zemo takes on Cap. Thor uses his Avengers this is before the Avengers ID cards, mind you, but they utilize some other mechanism to contact each other. So he quickly contacts Hank and Janet to rush back. So he immediately starts attacking them. They don't know what the heck's going on. Word gets out, and Iron Man shows up in the nick of time to once again just solving a problem in a lickety split. It's like, oh, Thor must be under hypnosis. And it's like, how do you know that? It's like, there was nothing leading to that conclusion. There was no deductive reason to lead to that. You just assumed that. But he lucked right into it being right. So he uses, I can use this gizmo on my, armor to dehypnotize him. And I was like, oh, I was, under hypnosis. Oh, I remember. It was the Enchantress and her bewitchment. And while Cap, tangling with Zemo, retreated to his ship to go back to New York, Cap hisses a ride on it, and they end up flying back. And Enchantress and Executioner knock out Cap and slink away with Zemo to fight again another day. So we're quickly going to the last little story here, which I thought is kind of important to include, because I was trying to find what's a good ending spot, and I figured this is probably a good ending spot to this little adventure. One second here. So for the time being, they dealt with Zemo and Executioner and Enchantress. who would technically be part of the Masters of Evil. So, the UN contacts the Avengers because there's this mysterious spaceship that shows up in a wooded area of Virginia, and despite the military's efforts, they can't really do any damage. Matter of fact, the ship ends up shooting at the tanks and turning into like crumbling pile of metal. So the Avengers shows up, and it turns out it is Kang the Conqueror. And Kang explains that he's from the year 3000, and he, this is his first dealings with the Avengers, but he also dealt with the Fantastic Four because he mentions he, was also Rama Tut back in Egyptian times, and he comes to bring his knowledge and tactical genius and his futuristic technology to the 20th century to pretty much conquer it. And there's no force in this time period that can really stand up to him. And matter of fact, the Avengers are ill prepared to deal with this guy who's pretty much like reduced their efforts inert completely. Even Thor's hammer, is repelled by his shields. But in the throes of the battle, the Avengers ends up getting captured in Kang's ship, all but Janet, who runs away with Rick to try to figure out how to deal with Kang. And of course, through this like beam that paralyzes them, Thor is reverted to Donald Blake temporarily. And Kang tells like the UN secretary or sub-secretary or something like that to like contact your world leaders. You got 24 hours to submit to me, otherwise I will lay waste to one country at a time. Otherwise, until one of y'all, till y'all eventually submit. Then the Team Brigade, God, can't even take that title seriously. They, in order to figure out a way to release the Avengers, they pretend to want to work for Kang. So it's like, okay, I always want more underlings. So he takes them onto his ship where they have time to try to sift through his stuff to try to release the Avengers. While Janet goes back home to get this particular weapon device and brings it back to the battle area. The gang managed to release the Avengers, and not sure it will probably be brought up in another issue, but as Donald Blake, he realized that Iron Man probably has a heart condition because he kind of, I'm not sure he senses it or it's like something like was kind of obvious to him as like a physician. As like, okay, this is, something's off with you. You seem like you probably have some kind of chest problem or something like that. But Iron Man quickly recovers, so somebody, so they won't be none too much the wiser. But, I think Thor kind of caught on at least a little bit. So Janet returns, bringing this particular invention to Giant Man, who uses it on Kang, which destroys fabric and any piece of machinery. Like it's like a quick, fix to deal with something like Kang, but it slowly crumples his tech and clothing, which pretty much like is the basis of his power set in a way. So little by little, he's becoming ineffective against the Avengers. So he ends up running away onto his ship while the others are distracted by this little missile that Kang sends off to distract them while he runs away. So this is their first, but not the last, encounter of Kang the Conqueror. And that's it. That's as far as I read in this early Avengers of the Avengers. So, like I said, it's tend to be a bit wordy. Is mostly thanks to the narration boxes, which I think half of which you can pretty much take out. But like I mentioned before, I'm pretty sure they have no clue of whether or not the Avengers books will get canceled. So they try to do as much as possible. Try to pretty much entice the young readers to keep, their parents buying these and keep it going, because they really hit the nail on the head with this idea of bringing in all these separate superheroes to form this great team. But the downside reading through this is like, okay, some of the stuff to solve certain problems seems too fast. They come to certain conclusions too easily. And personally, and this is probably just me, and I might be in the minority, I don't care for the illustration. I know it's Jack Kirby. He's probably like the grandfather of comics in terms of art, but this is not my favorite illustration at all, personally. But I still had mad respect for him because he had a hand in creating a lot of heroes along with Stan over the years. But yeah, that was the Avengers. I got, another Marvel comic that I really want to read through. There's going to be quite a bit of Marvel stuff I'm going to be going through in the coming weeks. So it's going to be like a bit of a Marvel kick for a hot minute. But we'll get through some DC stuff in the later part of this year. So don't worry about that. But yeah, let me know what you guys think of the early adventures of the Avengers. Have you read these, growing up at all? Because this is my first time reading through the actual stories. Not all of it, obviously, because there's a lot. There's a lot going on. But I figure I'd go through at least the first dozen issues. It should have been more than enough to get my mind around what Jack and Stan was doing with this team. At any rate, I will see you guys a little bit later, maybe, because I was trying to, get into some more Marvel Rivals. Maybe I can fit in at least a little bit of time because I want to learn some Spider-Man. If I do, I do. If not, I'll see you guys tomorrow with more content later. But anyway, take care and I'll see you all soon. Peace.